Before we begin, a quick warning. Tennessee True Crime contains detailed descriptions and images of real-life violence. Some listeners and viewers may find the material deeply disturbing. This content is intended for mature audiences only. And remember, the goal of sharing these stories is not to sensationalize tragedy, but to honor the victims, understand the truth, and give voice to those who can no longer speak for themselves. Listener discretion is advised. This show opening is brought to you by Namaste Wellness and Aesthetics. Visit Namaste for all of your skincare, weight loss, and primary care needs. The awesome ladies at Namaste are located at 159 Omni Drive right here in McMinnville, Tennessee. Now, on to the story. In the early morning hours of August 6, 2004, in a quiet neighborhood in Nashville, a man lay dead inside his home. His name was Johnny Mitchell Allen. He was 43 years old, a real estate agent, known by most accounts as successful, stable, predictable. But the person responsible for his death was a 16-year-old girl. And if you only look at that moment, that single violent decision, you will miss everything that led up to it. Because this story doesn't begin with a gunshot. It begins years earlier with a child who never really had a chance. This is the story of Cyntoia Brown. They say the South never forgets, and Tennessee, she remembers everything. Welcome to Tennessee True Crime, where the shadows of the volunteer state's past meet the stories that refuse to be forgotten. I'm your host, Tiffany Morgan. Each week, we dig into twisted tales of betrayal, violence, and mystery. The ones where whispers carry truth, and the answers are never as simple as they seem. Let's step into the dark and piece together the clues. Because in Tennessee, some secrets still haunt the hills. This is Tennessee True Crime.
Down through the smoky hollers where the cold wind sighs, footsteps fall where the moonlight hides, whispers over rivers, a secret lost in time. Welcome to Tennessee True Crime.
Cyntoia Brown was born on January 29, 1988. Before she ever took her first breath, she had already been exposed to instability. Her biological mother, Georgina Mitchell, struggled with substance addiction, crack cocaine, alcohol, a cycle that didn't pause for pregnancy. There were also allegations, whispers, that survival sometimes meant exchanging her body for money. Whether those details were ever fully proven or not, they became part of the narrative that would follow Cyntoia for the rest of her life. Shortly after birth, she was adopted by Gloria Brown. Gloria was a nurse, structured, religious, a woman who believed deeply in doing the right thing. She didn't just want to raise a child, she wanted to save one. But love, structure, stability, they weren't enough to quiet what was already taking root. From a young age, Cyntoia struggled in ways that didn't always make sense at the time. She was impulsive, defiant, prone to running away, and there were incidents, small at first and then bigger ones. Trouble at school, conflicts at home, behavior that felt unexplainable. Eventually, she was diagnosed with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, a condition that can affect impulse control and reasoning and the ability to process your consequences. But in the early 2000s, that diagnosis did not come with much understanding. It came with labels. She's difficult. She's out of control. She's troubled. By 15, the tension at home had reached a breaking point. Cyntoia had begun running away. Not once, not twice, but over and over again, each time drifting further from anything resembling safety. And eventually, she met him, Garion McLaughlin. He went by Cutthroat, and at first he didn't look like a threat. He looked like someone offering attention, something we have seen in previous cases, control disguised as care. But that illusion didn't last long. Prosecutors would later describe him as simply a pimp. Someone who saw exactly what Cyntoia was: young, vulnerable, isolated, and very exploitable. What followed wasn't a relationship, it was dominance. Cyntoia moved from place to place. She was given rules, she was given expectations, and those expectations came with consequences. Violence, manipulation, psychological pressures. She was forced into prostitution at 15 years old. August 6th, 2004, Cyntoia was still just 16 years old. That night, she was out on Murfreesboro Road, an area known at the time for motels and truck stops and the kind of activity that lives in the shadows. She had been told she needed to do more to earn her keep. That's where she met Johnny Mitchell Allen. He was 43 years old, like we said, a real estate agent, and by all outward appearances, someone living a very ordinary life. Johnny pulled over and asked Cyntoia if she needed a ride. She said yes. Turns out, old Johnny asked Cyntoia if she was looking for any action. There was a conversation, brief, transactional, and an agreement was made regarding price. So instead of going to a hotel like Cyntoia normally does, Johnny said, "No, let's just go back to my home. It's just right over here in Nashville. It's close by. I'd rather go there. I don't want to be seen at a hotel." So she went. Inside, things appeared calm, at least on the surface. But beneath that surface, something shifted. What exactly happened in those moments has never been fully agreed upon because, of course, the only surviving account came from Cyntoia herself. Now, she would later say that once inside the house, she became increasingly uneasy, that something about his demeanor felt very off. She claimed that he showed her a collection of guns, that he talked about them, handled them, told her what an important man he was in this town, talked about how he was in the military. And when they finally went to bed, Cyntoia alleges that after a while, she pretended to sleep while he was still groping at her, grabbing her genitals aggressively to the point where it hurt her. At one point, she said she grunted and shrugged him off. She said that when she did that, the look on his face was so intensely fierce. That look in his eyes told her, he is about to hit me. But instead, he rolled over and reached toward a nightstand. Now, in her mind, that movement meant one thing: a weapon. Now, whether that perception was accurate or shaped by everything that she had already been through is a question that still lingers. Because by that point, Cyntoia was not just a teenager in a stranger's home. She was a child who had been exploited and controlled and conditioned to expect violence. Fear, for her, did not need much to be triggered. At some point, she retrieved a gun from her purse. There was no warning shot, no struggle that anyone else can confirm, just a single decision made in a matter of seconds. She fired one shot into the back of his head. The room fell silent, and in that silence, whatever fear had been building was replaced by something else, something immediate and something very final. What happened next would become just as important as the shot itself. Because in the eyes of the law, what you do after a trigger is pulled can define everything that came before it. The silence afterward didn't last long, because what she did next would shape how the world saw her. She took things from his home and she left. Not to safety, but back into the same world she had been trying to survive. A man was dead, a teenage girl was running, and the question, the one that would define everything that followed, was already forming. Was this self-defense, or was it murder? And there's a moment in every case where the story stops being about what happened and starts becoming about how it will be judged. For Cyntoia Brown, that moment came very early. She was charged with criminal homicide, especially aggravated robbery, unlawful possession of a handgun, and criminal impersonation. Each charge carrying its own weight. But together, forming a narrative the prosecution would lean on heavily, because from the very beginning it was framed as intent. Life in prison was on the table, and the prosecution's case was direct, almost clinical in its simplicity. They told the jury, this wasn't fear, this wasn't panic, this was an opportunity for Cyntoia, a calculated decision. That after being brought into his house, after seeing what was there, Cyntoia made a choice. They pointed to the physical evidence, the trajectory of the bullet, the position of the body, and they told the jury she shot him in the head while he was laying down, probably asleep. To them, that detail mattered because it suggested something very specific, not self-defense, but control. They emphasized what came next. Cyntoia didn't call for help. She didn't run to a neighbor. She didn't report what she claimed had just happened. Instead, they said she moved through the house, taking what she could carry. His wallet, his firearms, and then she took his truck and she left. Now, to prosecutors, those actions told a clearer story than any words could. A story of motive, of robbery, of someone who took an opportunity that they saw right in front of their face. They framed her not as a frightened and exploited teenager, but as someone who had learned to survive by any means necessary. And that night, they argued, survival crossed the line into murder. To them, it wasn't complicated. No gray areas, no misunderstandings, just a sequence of choices that ended in a man's death. Now, in Tennessee, the line between childhood and adulthood in the justice system isn't always as clear as you might expect. At just 16 years old, a teenager can be transferred out of juvenile court and into adult criminal court, and that process is known as judicial transfer. Now, that decision isn't automatic. A judge must first hold a transfer hearing and weigh several factors. The seriousness of the offense, whether the act was committed in an aggressive or premeditated way, the teen's prior record, and whether the juvenile system is seen as capable of rehabilitation. But once that transfer is granted, everything changes. The protections of juvenile court fall away, and the focus shifts from rehabilitation to punishment. And a 16-year-old, still legally a minor in every other part of life, can suddenly face the same consequences as an adult, including decades behind bars. In cases like Cyntoia Brown's, that single decision does not just shape the trial, it shapes an entire lifetime. So before the trial even began, the court made a critical decision. Cyntoia would be tried as an adult. at 16 years old. That meant the system would not center on her age or her exploitation or her developmental limitations, not the way it might have if she would have stuck in a juvenile court. But the defense told a very different story. This was not about a single night, not about a single decision, but everything that came before it. The defense didn't start with the crime scene. They started with Cyntoia's life. They brought in experts, psychologists, specialists in trauma, professionals who understood what prolonged abuse does to a developing mind. Because what they needed the jury to see was that some things aren't always visible. They explained how trauma does not just leave emotional scars, it rewires your brain. It changes how a person reads danger, how quickly their fear rises, how survival instincts take over, long before logic has a chance to catch up. They told the jury this is not some typical 16-year-old. This was a child who had been living in survival mode, day after day, night after night. They argued that Cyntoia Brown was not acting out of greed. She was acting out of conditioning. She had been trafficked, controlled, taught through experience that violence can come without warning. And when you live like that long enough, your definition of danger changes. They said that Cyntoia's fear did not begin in that bedroom. It had been building for months, maybe years. Every threat, every act of control, every moment where saying no was not an option. All of it shaping how she saw the world. So when she told them she was afraid, the defense asked the jury, please take that seriously, not as an excuse, but as context. Because to her, a movement toward a nightstand with a man who was handling weapons, a shift in his tone, those weren't neutral actions, they were warning signs. And in that moment, her brain did not pause to weigh the outcomes. It didn't ask what a reasonable person might do. It did what she had been trained to do: survive. The defense didn't argue that a life wasn't lost. They didn't argue that the outcome wasn't tragic. What they argued was that in that moment, Cyntoia's fear was real, even if the threat wasn't. And that distinction might be the most important one in the entire case. In Tennessee, the way that the justice system views cases like this one has changed drastically, quietly but significantly. Back in 2004, when Cyntoia Brown stood in that courtroom, the language was very different. A 16-year-old exchanging sex for money was often labeled a prostitute. The focus was on the act, not the circumstances behind it. There was little distinction made between choice and coercion. But today, that same situation is understood through a very different lens. A minor engaged in commercial sex is now widely recognized as a victim of trafficking, not a willing participant. And that shift matters because it changes everything about how the system responds. Modern laws, both in Tennessee and across the country, have moved toward what are called safe harbor protections. And these laws are designed to do one thing: treat exploited children as victims in need of protection rather than offenders in need of punishment. Instead of arrest and prosecution, minors in these situations now are more likely to be referred to social services and provided trauma-informed care, placed in protective environments rather than detention. And law enforcement officers are now trained to look for signs of coercion: control by an older individual, lack of freedom of movement, fear-based behavior, inconsistent or rehearsed stories. things that in the early 2000s might have been overlooked or misunderstood. There's also a deeper understanding now of how trauma reshapes perception. A child who has been abused and manipulated and conditioned to expect violence does not assess danger in the same way that others will. What might seem like an overreaction to one person can feel like survival to another. If a case like Cyntoia's unfolded today, her defense would not just argue fear. They would likely argue trafficking victimization from the start. Her history with Gary and McGlothen, the control, the exploitation, would take center stage, not sit on the sidelines. And a jury would be asked to consider not just what she did, but what had been done to her. Now, that does not erase the crime. It doesn't undo the loss of life. But it does change the question from what did she do to what happened to her, and how did that shape the moment that everything went wrong? And in cases like this, that difference can mean everything. Nonetheless, when the jury went back into that room, everything came down to how they chose to see her. Not her past, not the years that led her there, just that moment. And when they returned, the verdict was final. She was found guilty, not just of murder, but of premeditated murder. That word echoed through the courtroom: premeditated, cold, deliberate, intentional. It meant the jury believed that somewhere in those final seconds, there was time. Time to think, time to choose, time to decide to kill. It didn't matter how brief that moment may have been. In the eyes of the law, it was enough. And with that single word, everything about Cyntoia's story changed, from fear to intent. Then came the part that doesn't raise its voice, but it lands the heaviest: life in prison. No dramatic reaction, no second chance built into the moment, just a sentence that quietly erased the rest of her life. With parole eligibility after 51 years. Now, she was 16. 16. Old enough in that courtroom to be called an adult, but young enough that 51 years didn't just sound like a number, it sounded like forever. It meant she would be nearly 70 years old before she would even be considered for release. Decades. Birthdays that would pass inside concrete walls, years stacked on years, with no guarantee of anything at the end of them. And just like that, a single decision, measured in seconds, was answered with a lifetime. A child sentenced as an adult. A life effectively over before it began. But outside the courtroom, something was starting to shift. Not yet loud, not yet national, but growing. Some stories don't stay buried. Some resonate. And this one was just beginning to surface. For years, Cyntoia Brown's case sat quietly. No headlines, no national outrage, just time passing in a prison cell. But over time, the world outside began to change. There were more conversations about juvenile justice and human trafficking and trauma and the brain, and they evolved, and suddenly, her case did not look the same anymore. Now, by the mid-2010s, her story reached a wider audience. Public figures began speaking out. Kim Kardashian, Rihanna, however you young kids say it, Alyssa Milano, that one I know because I'm old. They questioned, how does a trafficked child receive a life sentence? And the narrative shifted. Not completely, but enough. Her legal team pushed for appeals, arguing that her sentence was excessive. Her age and trauma weren't properly weighed, and the system had failed to recognize her exploitation. But appeals are slow, we know that, and often unsuccessful, even when public opinion changes. The law doesn't always move with it. Now, Cyntoia's time in prison was not just spent staring at walls. She spent her time advocating for herself, earning an education, and writing letters to the governor asking for clemency. She got her GED. She started college at Lipscomb. In 2019, after years of pressure, Bill Haslam granted that clemency. And after serving 15 years, Cyntoia Brown walked out of prison. This was her letter to the governor and those who helped her. Thank you, Governor Haslam, for your act of mercy in giving me a second chance. I will do everything I can to justify your faith in me. I want to thank those at the Tennessee Department of Corrections who saw something in me worth salvaging, especially Miss Connie Seabrooks for allowing me to participate in the Lipscomb Life program. It changed my life. I am also grateful to those at the Tennessee Department of Corrections who will work with me over the next several months to help me in the transition from prison to the free world. Thank you, Dr. Richard Good and Dr. Kate Watkins, and all of you at Lipscomb University for opening up a whole new world for me. I have one course left to finish my bachelor's degree, which I will complete in May 2019. I am thankful for all the support, prayers, and encouragement I have received. We truly serve a God of second chances and new beginnings. The Lord has held my hand this whole time, and I would have never made it without Him. Let today be a testament to His saving grace. Thank you to my family for being a backbone these past 14 years. I am thankful to my lawyers and their staffs and all the others who, for the last decade, have freely given of their time and expertise to help me get to this day. I love all of you and will forever be grateful. With God's help, I am committed to live the rest of my life helping others, especially young people. My hope is to help other young girls avoid ending up where I have been. Thank you. Now, her life after release, that kind of freedom came with a different kind of weight. Not the kind you can see, really, but the kind you carry. Because when Cyntoia Brown stepped out of prison, she wasn't just stepping into a fresh start. She was stepping into a life that had already been written about, documented, debated, judged, and remembered. Every introduction came with a past. Every opportunity came with a question. She married Jamie Brown, a relationship that began while she was still behind bars. A connection built slowly, through distance, through words, through time. Not something rushed, something chosen. And then she found her voice. Not all at once, not loudly at first, but steadily. She began speaking publicly, standing in front of rooms full of strangers, telling a story that most people only know in pieces, advocating for victims of trafficking, juvenile justice reform, not as someone looking in from the outside, but as someone who had lived it. She wrote about her life, not to excuse it, not to erase what happened, but to understand it, to take a story that had been told about her and finally tell it for herself. Today, her story sits in a place that isn't easy. It doesn't resolve cleanly. It doesn't offer comfort, really. To some, she is a survivor. a child who was failed, who endured, and who eventually found her way out. To others, she is nothing more than a convicted murderer, someone who took a life and was granted a second chance they believe should never have come. And maybe the truth is that both of those things can exist at the same time. There are cases that give you answers, clear ones, where the facts all line up and the conclusion feels certain. And then there are cases like this one that kind of just stick with you. Because they don't just ask what happened, they ask why. They ask what justice is supposed to look like when the person standing trial was shaped by things in such a horrific way that they never chose. They ask whether fear, real, learned, or conditioned fear, should be measured the same way as intent. Because the truth is, what happened that night in Nashville was only one piece of a much larger story. A story that began long before that door ever closed behind her, and one that did not end when the prison gates opened. It was just the moment that the rest of the world finally stopped and started looking. Let's listen to Centoya.
Yeah, it can absolutely happen to anyone. I think that we really need to be mindful of the different influences that affect children, that affect young people. You know, our minds are so impressionable when we're young. And what our parents teach us, that's one thing, but we're learning from school, we're learning from our peers. Now we're learning so much with social media. You know, there's so many things that are glorified now that aren't necessarily conducive to a healthy understanding of relationships, of self-worth, of so many things that parents may try to instill in their kids, but it's being overcome by all these other messages. So I think it's very important that we have those conversations about what's out there and why that may not necessarily be the best for us to take in, because what I can remember is I took on a lot of things around me as truth, and they weren't necessarily the truth. They weren't what my mother was teaching me. They weren't leading me in a positive direction. And so I think it's very important that we address that, because those are big factors. And we've all done things that we can regret, obviously some worse than others. But the point is that there is redemption. You know, there is possibility that God can change you if you open your heart to allow him to. And I'm thankful that he did that with me. And it's available for anybody. I don't think anybody is beyond repair. I don't think anybody is just, they just need to be thrown away. Like, I think that as people, we're so much more complex than just being limited to our mistakes and the bad decisions that we make.
This episode, Her Fatal Fear, was written and hosted by me, Tiffany Morgan, and produced by Christian Weeder at Main Street Media. Background music and theme song by John T. Productions. Research support from Murder to Mercy, Court Reports, The Tennessean, and News Channel 5. This finale was brought to you by the wonderful folks at Jones & Co. Real Estate. If you are buying or selling a home, come visit us at 304 Mulligan Street or give us a call at 931-474-2020. There is a wonderful team of qualified and friendly realtors ready to go to work for you. And if you'd like to sponsor an episode, we'd love to partner with you. Our sponsors keep our shows funded and running. To support Tennessee True Crime, follow us on Facebook at Tennessee True Crime and Instagram at TN True Crime. You can find case and evidence photos on those socials. We are also now on Spotify and most other streaming platforms. Give us a follow and please leave us a rating and a comment after you listen. If you have a case that you're interested in me covering, please feel free to email me at tntruecrime@mainstreetmedia.llc or give us a shout out on any one of those social media platforms. I have started having people reach out to me, whether it's to request case coverage or give feedback or just introduce themselves and tell me that they're a listener, and I absolutely love it. It is truly an honor and a pleasure to talk with each of you. I will be working on some of your cases in the near future, and I greatly appreciate the emails and the communications with news stories and information regarding your loved ones. Join me next week as we uncover another Tennessee case that has left a lasting mark. Because here in Tennessee, we never stop telling the stories that matter, and some secrets we refuse to let stay buried. Tune in next time on Tennessee True Crime.
Down through the smoky hollers where the cold wind sighs, footsteps fall where the moonlight hides, whispers over rivers, a secret lost in time. Welcome to Tennessee. True crime. Dark tales in the mountains where the mist won't lie, echoes of the fallen under starless skies. Hear the hush of memory, the voice of the unsaid. This is Tennessee True Crime, where the shadows tread.